I spent a full year on every social media platform telling myself that scrolling was research, that consuming what worked would help me build that which worked for the personal brand that I was trying to build. What was actually happening was that I was creating less every month while consuming more every single day. So I did what everyone else would do in that situation, started researching, and I saw a lot of recommendations, so I went for it. I did a 14-day dopamine detox that included me deleting all the apps, deleting or turning off all notifications on my phone, and by day 14 I genuinely felt free. However, 3 days after that, I was back scrolling harder than before. So this meant that I had actually fixed nothing, and it took me a long time to understand what I had actually missed, because it wasn't the apps, trust me. It was not even the notifications, and it was not even some sort of habit that I had. It was something running so quietly underneath all of it that no dopamine detox in the world is designed to touch it. Let me take you back to before the detox, because the thing that I missed was already forming long before I noticed it. When I first started building a presence on social media, I had a genuine goal. I wanted to create content, to teach what I was learning, and to build something tangible, something that I would be proud of. But to create well, I found out and eventually convinced myself that you need to understand the environment. You need to know what is performing well. So every morning I would open the platforms and spend time in the feed, researching and strategizing. However, what I did not notice until much later is what that daily routine was doing to my brain beneath the surface. Like every time I'd open a platform and something interesting appeared, my brain registered a small reward, like a notification, a reply, someone's story unfolding, or a piece of news that I had been following. And none of it was dramatic, but each of those tiny moments was doing something very specific. It was training my brain to expect a certain level of stimulation, not once a day, but throughout the day. Like the moment anything felt slow or uncertain or effortful, the reflex was already forming. Like I'll just reach for the phone and get that hit, right? And keep moving from there. So think of it like a floor that rises every time that you feed it cheap, fast, unpredictable rewards. And the higher that floor rises, the more the things in your real life struggle to clear it. And that floor is what researchers call your dopamine baseline. And once it gets high enough, the things in your life that used to feel genuinely satisfying can no longer compete with the feed. Like for me, it showed up in a specific way, like sitting down to actually create something, to write, to build, to think through a problem. Those began to feel heavier than it used to. Not harder because the work was harder, but heavier because the reward felt distant and uncertain compared to the immediate feedback loops that using a platform will give me. So I was creating less every month, and I blamed my inspiration, I blamed discipline, I blamed my schedule. However, none of those were the problem. Like my dopamine baseline had risen to a point where real meaningful work could barely compete with that reflex that I had built over months of daily platform use. And here is the critical thing about a rising baseline. You don't feel it happening. You feel it only in what stops feeling good. Like patience gets harder, long reads feel so slow to you, creative work starts to feel like effort in a way it never used to, and you keep reaching out for the phone, not because you are weak, but because your brain is doing exactly what it was trained to do. Now, I understand what the actual problem was, and the obvious phase, which was the detox that I did, the as in what I've already tried, was completely wrong for a very specific reason. When most people identify social media as a problem, which most do actually, you might as well identify it as a problem, and the response is immediate and it feels logical, like remove it, restrict it, detox from it. I tried all three before the 14-day attempt that I did, like taking shorter breaks, app limits, deleting platforms for a month and reinstalling them weeks later. And every time the results was the same. Like the behavior came back with more intensity than before. So I kept assuming that I lacked discipline, that if I just committed longer, the craving would eventually dissolve. And here's the part where my pharmacy background eventually helped me understand clearly that a dopamine detox does not recalibrate that baseline that you have set. So the popular framing around dopamine detox, the idea that you are depleting dopamine by scrolling and that a detox lets it replenish, is not how any of this actually works. Dopamine does not sit in a tank that you drain through overuse. What actually changes with chronic overstimulation is the sensitivity of your reward pathways. The system becomes less responsive. It becomes less responsive to smaller, slower rewards. Like the threshold for what registers as satisfying keeps climbing as the baseline goes up. So a detox does not restore that sensitivity. The pathways do not reset because the source went quiet for 2 weeks. What actually happens during a dopamine detox is that the craving would just accumulate without an outlet. The baseline does not come down, the brain simply waits, and the moment the source returns, it does not ease back in, it rushes to it. And that's exactly what happened to me on day 15 through to day 18 after the detox, right? And this is why so many people complete a dopamine detox, feel genuinely better afterwards, and then cannot understand why they're back exactly where they started 2 weeks later. The detox treated the symptom. The baseline, which is the actual cause, was never touched. So if a dopamine detox does not work, and the science is quite clear that it does not work in the way most people believe, the question becomes something more uncomfortable, like what actually lowers the baseline? That becomes a critical question, because it has to be something, right? Otherwise, nobody ever escapes this loop. And I know from my own experience that an escape is possible, but the way out looked nothing like another detox. Still on my detox story, long after I had done that detox and it didn't work, I stopped trying to remove anything and I started asking a different question. Not how do I spend less time on my phone, but what would have to be true for something else to pull harder than the feed? Because it feels that this thing was a force that was pulling me so hard. So I began to question what else could pull me harder than that. And the answer came from something that happened almost by accident. At a point I started building a product, like a piece of software. It was something small just for myself at first, and something unexpected happened. I got obsessed, like not disciplined and not committed, rather obsessed. The kind where 3 hours pass and your phone is still face down where you left it and you genuinely did not notice. Like the kind where you wake up thinking about a problem that you were working on the night before. In fact, even in your sleep, you begin to think about that problem or the thing that you were building. The kind of pool that used to be reserved entirely for that feed, but was now pointed at something that I was building rather than consuming. And that obsession did something no dopamine detox ever could. It competed with that baseline that had been set, and over time it won because I ended up giving it more time and doing it, and I enjoyed doing it, and I always wanted to go build with. And this was not because building was easier than scrolling. It was significantly harder, if I'm being honest, but the reward it produced was different in a specific way that matters. When you scroll and something lands, the reward is immediate and then it's gone. It fades within minutes and the reflex is already reaching out for the next hit. Like, that's exactly how a high baseline sustains itself. Fast rewards, fast fading, and constant reaching. When you build something and it works, the reward is slower. However, it stays. Like, it's still there an hour later, the next morning, like a week later, when someone else uses a thing that you made. That kind of reward does not require constant refreshing, and because it does not fade quickly, your brain starts recalibrating what it considers worth pursuing. And that is how the baseline actually comes down. Not through a dopamine detox, like true replacement with something that produces a deeper, long-lasting reward than the thing that you are replacing. So you do not beat cheap dopamine by removing it, and that's what almost everyone teaches on the internet. Rather, you beat it by finding something worth being obsessed with, something that can replace that. So the scroll only keeps winning because you have not yet found something that pulls harder than it does. For me, once I found building, the mindless scrolling stopped. Not because I locked my phone away, but because when I picked it up now, like, I'm usually looking for something specific. The pull is gone because something else is already pulling me. Like, I really want to go take my laptop and start building something or continue building that thing that I was doing. And it has continued for a very long time. The question that should be sitting with you right now is not, how do I do a better dopamine detox? Rather, it is, what is a thing that if I give it genuine time and real attention might actually obsess me? If you want to test this, do not start with another detox. Rather, start with like 1 hour tomorrow morning before you even open any platform. Not to be productive in a general sense, you should rather focus on working on the one specific thing that you have been meaning to explore but keep postponing. Build the smallest possible version of something, or write the first paragraph of something. Start the thing that has been waiting. Not because 1 hour changes everything, but because 1 hour without the feed gives your brain a taste of a different kind of reward. And your brain, once it gets a real taste of something that satisfies it at a deeper level, starts asking for more of that instead. So the dopamine detox is not the point. The replacement is. If you are in that loop right now, consuming more and creating less, feeling like the work that you actually care about gets slightly heavier every morning, that is your baseline talking, and it can be recalibrated, as you have seen from my own story or personal experience. It just cannot be starved into submission as most of the people out there make it seem. So hear this: you don't beat cheap dopamine by removing it. You beat it by finding something worth being obsessed with and replacing whatever is giving you the cheap dopamine. I'll see you in the next video.